Item 13 of the agenda is the request from the City of Madison Police K-9 Equine Partners and Cream City Timing LLC for the use of Alliant Park and Quann Park for the Friends of Madison Mounted Police fundraiser 5K run on May 5th. We have some speakers. We've also received emails. I hope everybody is ready. All right. So this is Nick Rivera, I believe, at 755 Safer in Brookfield, Wisconsin, who supports and wishes to speak. Welcome.
Hi. I'm more here to answer any questions that you might have about the event, or if anybody has any questions about the event.
So you represent Cream City Timing
Correct.
LLC, which is the operator of the event?
Yes. Yep. So I'm a part owner in that company.
Well, perhaps maybe we should hear from everybody else first.
That
I was
sounds.
going to say, since he's
Oh,
the
okay, go ahead.
sponsor, maybe he could kind of provide a brief overview. Give us a brief
An overview of the event.
Yeah.
So it's a 5K fun run fundraiser that supports the Friends of Madison Mounted Police. They're the unit that patrols State Street and football games and other events that are going on through the city. The Friends of Madison Mounted are there as kind of the backbone of support. I believe they pay for them for their board and food and all that stuff for where the horses live. So this run just benefits that nonprofit to continue to keep that unit going, keep the horses fed.
Do you have a sense of how the route will interact with the park and what will be happening in which parks?
So it starts and finishes in Alliant Park, and then it will run along that wing road path up through Quann Park and then back into Alliant. So the use of Quann Park is fairly limited. They're just running through it. There's not anything, there's no structures there that would take a lot of time to clean up or anything. So the amount of time that would be spent in Quann Park is fairly limited. It's not the entire duration of the event. It was planned to go for 3 hours. From the start of the event, the amount of time it takes to run or walk a 5K is about an hour and a half. So 15 minutes on either end of that to set up the course in the park and then to break it down on the back end of it.
And the demonstration of the horses is in Old.
It's in Alliant Park, yep, in that field. And that's just a brief, 5 or 10 minute demonstration. The officers in the unit are coming up with different ideas of things to do, like bring the kids and paint the horse kind of a thing, or horseshoes at different events and stuff like that for the community to kind of get together and support these officers.
Is there some concern about what it does to the turf
So-
in May?
That has been raised. That question has been raised, and to address that, we're very conscious of the effect on the turf and everything. If it's muddy or the ground is not solid, then they just won't do the demonstration. They can still have the horses on the pavement and still do the paint the horse thing, or play whatever games on the pavement. But if it is soggy out, we're definitely not gonna. It's both keeping the park in mind, but also the horses and the officers' safety. You don't want them trotting around when it's wet and sloppy out. They just risk it slip and fall and stuff like that. So it's also very dirty.
I just read this, I wasn't sure who was in the race. Is it just the people that are in the race?
Yeah, not the horses. Although that idea has been bounced around too, having them involved in some kind of capacity, but I think that would take a little bit more orchestration than what we have done for this year.
So are you saying that Quann would be closed only for 2 hours, or for the duration that we see here, which is the whole 8 to 11:30?
So I would only need 15 minutes before the race start to set up cones and get the marshals out there, just because it's kind of a little bit of a labyrinth. And then at the end, 15 minutes just after everybody passes through to collect all the cones and get people cleared of that. So I would expect it to be from 8:45 until 9:45. Would be the time it would take people to clear through that park.
other questions of Mr. Rivera? Thank you. You'll be around for a minute?
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
Marguerite Payne of 1364 Fish Hatchery Road opposes partially and wishes to speak. Thank you for coming.
Hi. I'm primarily concerned about Quann Park because that's a park that I use nearly every day. And I know lots and lots of people who take their dogs there. It's one of the few places that we can do that. The Alliant Energy Center already takes away our use of that park many days during the during the spring, summer, and fall. And I 100% support the police canine and equine units. I would just encourage them to find a route that does not take away our use of Quann Park for, yet one more morning on top of what Alliant Energy Center already takes away from us. So it's about the people who use the park to take their dogs out to exercise, and there's got to be another route that they can use. Thank you.
Thank you. And Barb Gilligan, 2009 Sunstrom Street, opposes and wishes to speak. Thank you.
Again, this is about the closure of Quann Dog Park for yet another run or event. This is my neighborhood park. This is the park I can walk to. When Quann is closed, I have to get in my car and drive out to one of the county dog parks in order to have that type of space. And we are just fed up with Alliant Energy Center and the destruction and the closures that they have. And then this is just one more weekend morning that, oh geez, dogs and people who want to walk in that park don't count. It's just, I wrote a long email, and I trust that you've all read it because I've described it, all of my opposition. Again, I don't oppose the run in general, I just want it to stay out of Quann Dog Park. I got a message from Ms. Lamberty from Park saying, oh, well, one of the conditions was that they can't close the whole park and they need to put up signage. Well, what you're doing when you use that loop as a run is you're closing 90% of the park and you're pushing us into the creek corridor, which is a wonderful thing that we need and we appreciate, but it's not perfect. It's not fully fenced. It's open to the creek, so dogs that want to go in the water and swim, they can get out of that section. They can go around the end of the fence and be up on Olin Avenue in no time flat. And the second real problem with that is that we have a continuous flow of garbage and trash coming into the creek corridor from the adjacent waste transfer station. I have to leash my dog when I go in that stretch of the park because she is right up there on that slope eating the garbage. She comes home, she gets sick. I can't have her off leash there. I can't have her off leash in the winter when it's iced over because she'll go right around the end of the fence. They also have the waste transfer station has a storm drain that brings garbage right down and lays it down in the park. So we have problems with that section, and to say, well, you have this little part, you should be willing to give up 90% of your space is not reasonable. We pay for these parks. We pay to have the use of these parks, and to have them closed for a run that could be held anywhere in the city. And I did look at some routes.
We'd like to keep our 3-minute limit today.
I'm available for questions.
Thank you very much. Can you run this without Quann?
It's very hard to find 3.1 miles in that area. There is an out and back route, but in coming up with this route, we're trying to take into consideration the amount of congestion that it would cause other areas. So using that lakeshore path, sending hundreds of people down and back. Same with using that the area north of Goodman Park for a start-finish. That's another route that we kind of looked at. You have a bunch of people parking in that neighborhood would really congest that up. And for the amount of time that we're really asking for, it seems like that is the minimal effect on that area in the community and also all other parts of the park that we could be using. Because there's a lot of people that also use that path that runs along the lake there. And when they're out walking or biking or something, all of a sudden 300 people come running up behind them, and then they all go back, and then they all come back down. It's kind of, I feel like that would congest a lot of things. A lot of people.
Other questions?
Another question to like anything that Alliant Energy usually plays a lot.
Yes.
Do they usually place without your approval? I can't remember them coming here but open to use it.
No, Alliant Energy there's a long-standing agreement the city entered into in 1996 as a part of a known terrace development, where Alliant Energy can use Quann Park essentially at its leisure. Parking for certain, but it's hard to say they can't use it for an event as well. I do want to be clear from the beginning here, this event is not an Alliant event, so I want to make sure I'm clear, but just giving that backstory. They do use it quite a bit. This past year there was some significant damage. I'm hopeful of some collaboration with the county over the coming months of an opportunity to potentially create an area at Quann Dog Park that is not the creek, that is permanently available, always 365, 24/7 for dogs. Because certainly as the two speakers tonight and others have articulated before, this is an original. It's an oldie, but probably still one of the besties, and definitely near the top of our dog park availability, centrally located, large scale. We're hopeful, even though that legal agreement gives the county to take all of it if they want. And they also, by the way, just so you guys know, you've heard from dogs, they also effectively closed tennis, our one tennis facility, 12-court tennis complexes back in Quann. And when Alliant wants to, they can close it all, effectively. They don't do anything on the tennis courts, but they can make it impossible to get to the parking and access. We've tried over the years to open lines of communication. I think that's actually fostered this conversation right now, where there's an opportunity to maybe reserve smaller, the Quann in total. Lisa, do you know the acreage of K? I think it's 45?
37 acres.
Yeah, 37 in the dog park.
Yeah, the dog park.
Yeah, so it's about 45 in total with the community gardens and the soccer field, the tennis, I think, 47. But the 37 acres of the dog park, our hope is we can get some percentage of that permanently reserved with the county willingly, when they have no legal obligation until 2046 is when their rights expire. 2046. That'd be right. It'd be 50 years after 1996. I'm going to stick around just for that, if I can. If I make it that long, I'll be here to remind this commission not to enter that agreement again. But it's a original 20-year with 3 unilateral 10-year renewals. So they're 10-year renewals, and who doesn't like to keep renewing something that gives them rights to somebody else's land?
So they're the only one who can renew it?
Yep, we can't do anything about that. We've been doing better holding them accountable for the damage they've done, I believe, creating a situation where they've recognized some of the challenges that they're facing if they continue. And like I said, hopefully that can bring us to the table. It has brought us to the table. Hopefully it brings us to a place where we can actually act on it. Because again, I'm just sharing with the public and the commission, we have no stick with them in regard to that. But we're hopeful that we can get them to collaborate on a willingness of saying that would work. That said, that is a sidebar conversation what we're here to talk about tonight, and I don't want to muddy AEC or blame AEC for this event. Certainly it's in the prerogative of the commission on this event to deny the use of Quann Park if it so chose. Either we come back with a separate route or not, or we work that out here, or we wouldn't. But this is, I don't want to muddy that as far as this commission has authority over the permit in this case. That was a long way to answer your question.
I mean, it's awkward because when CrossFit came to close the Goodman Pool, for a whole day, the commission denied it
Correct.
because of the effect on the park users. Here we're talking an hour. Hopefully with notice. How long will it take us?
People will be running through for roughly an hour. I mean, that setup and breakdown will take a little bit longer, but
2.5 hours. Who knows?
from start to finish of the entire event, which most of it is in Olin, they're just running through Quann.
Dogs running, taking walks too?
So Eric, you seem to offer where the commission can approve, deny, or refer?
Certainly.
With the hope of finding an amenable compromise here?
Certainly, you
Is
know,
that likely?
I consider staff we can always make suggestions. I wouldn't be able to speak to the organizers or the folks who are in opposition as to whether or not those suggestions would be well received or not. We would try to balance the issues as best we could. In this case, if we're at currently that, unless we're toggling on the restriction of how long they can be in the park, it's essentially a zero-sum game of can we make an event happen without hitting and impacting Quann Dog Park. I suspect we from staff would say, yes, we can, or yes, they can. The question would, from an organizer perspective, does that work and is it viable? You heard some of the concerns that the organizer brought up. Those are, there are valid concerns when you're running these type of things. We don't pretend or portray ourselves to be event organizer experts, and to make the event successful, certainly you wouldn't want to run around the Olin Park Pavilion 50 times, and that would be a 5K, I think. But it may not be well received from a registration standpoint. So we don't portray ourselves as experts in what's going to be a sellable, marketable product to support the nonprofit, but certainly I'm looking at Lisa as I'm doing this. I don't know if she's put together any maps already, or but we certainly would work through that as we have in other cases. And in this one, I can't speak to what the likelihood of a successful outcome is, and I think it would depend on who you ask if it's successful.
Can I ask a procedural question? If we refer it back and say, come up with some other situation, does it have to come before us again for the February agenda? Or does that give you enough time to? Does that give you enough time, if we push this to February for approval, to do what you need to do for your event?
So my big concern on that timing is now it's another month closer to the event. It's another month lost on being able to gain registrations and stuff like that. So if the vote is to not allow us to use Quann Park, I would really appreciate if the use of Olin Park is approved so that we can move forward with marketing and have that date and go forward with the race. And then if it has to come back in February, it has to come back in February. If we can just work it out with whoever, what an approved route would be, that's, you know, outside of coming back here and having to discuss it and take a base time, then I would be open to that. But the big thing is getting a date so that we can start getting things together and start partnering, get sponsorships and stuff like that. It's hard to do that when you don't have a date. So that's kind of the big, obviously, the route that I proposed is the best ideal situation. But I understand that there's people who have opposition and stuff, so I'm not opposed to a compromise.
So I think to me what does not make sense is Alliant Energy having unlimited access to the park to an extent that you have no say over it. That does not make sense to me at all. And so I do feel bad that people who live around the park has to go to other dog parks to exercise their dogs or do something like that. But the parks may be located at certain geographical areas, but they belong to everybody who lives in the city. And so while it is inconvenient for anybody to leave their neighborhood where they have a dog park and go to another neighborhood where there's a dog park, I do think 1 hour is not unreasonable for somebody who is doing a good cause within our community. And so personally, I will support this. The Goodman Community Center was a different thing. There's only one community pool in the whole city. And so we didn't want anybody to use that for a whole day. It's just an hour of dog park being closed. Again, it is inconvenient for the people who live there, but the parks are for everybody who lives in the city, and so I support it.
So just to add on that, I have 2 dogs that Eric knows because I bump into them sometimes, and we go to Quann Park a lot. And Quann Park is closed in the summer a lot, and it's suboptimal, to say the least. It's not good. But I don't want to blame the wrong people for the real problem, which is what I think. We are talking about an hour and a half. And so I was just a kind of solution from where we sit. I think we could say something like, you can close the park, but not any later than 10 a.m. on the day of your event. I also, there are 10 other acres in Quann Park. Is there a way to make the route run over by the football field or around the maintenance shed to where the softball fields are, the pool grounds? Would that encroach into other parks that we need to name as approvable options if you did decide to try to redraw the route so that it wouldn't go into the outreach dog park? Could we amend and have some language here to allow you to do that? And I think that's Goodman Park.
Yeah,
In
it's
the
Goodman
pool
Park.
grounds, which won't be used on the fifth.
Yeah, that would probably require that Goodman Park be added to the permit.
Right.
And then when I talked to Nick before the meeting, if the route changes considerably and he moves strictly to bike paths or even into the neighborhood streets, that's going to require a different permitting process for him, the parade process, and the street use process.
And I'm not a cross-country runner, so I don't know if anybody would want to run around the neighborhood.
I just want to touch back on the process questions. I mean, obviously, you can deny a permit in total. You can approve it as submitted. You can change the condition, the specific condition around the dog park. You can definitively work within that position, like tightening times between 8 and 10, all those kind of things. The alternative as far as getting something that doesn't come back in February would be, that doesn't close the dog park, would be to add a condition that it can't close the dog park, but can go, the rest of the permit's approved, it can go, and then adding Goodman, I think, is incredibly logical given the context we're in. If staff is supposed to work out the route, I think Goodman's going to be necessary. Is any other parks that you're aware of that we've touched?
Not to get in the route.
Park. I mean, obviously, there's a street use process that would probably be triggered as well, but certainly from a commission standpoint, if you approve the event but not have the dog park, I think that would be an option. Certainly, you could also just completely refer it until next month.
So, do we have a motion here? Summer, or?
So So I think I have a question to you. What will it work for you? Say, for example, if this is extended to Goodman.
It would offer a lot more flexibility in creating a route through that neighborhood. Obviously, I would have to use the street use permit, which that's not me to do that, I own the parking building. It would help in the process of changing the route and not include Quann Park, but again, going back to this being the ideal route, I would really like to have that.
And I do want to clarify just really quickly, just to how he said that for the group. If you don't want the dog park to be closed, please put that as a condition. Don't take Quann off the permitted parks. So they don't think it's viable to get a route through without touching Quann. I think it's potentially viable to get a route through that doesn't go into the dog park. Does that make sense?
So what is likely to happen if one is not closed and your event is ongoing?
You use the bike path that runs through Quann Park, but not the part that goes into the dog park,
Not the
in the
walking
fenced
distance.
area of the dog park.
There's a bike path that runs along Winker Creek, crosses from Goodman at the Goodman facility, bends back along the creek, and then comes out down by the community garden, actually near that underpass that would take you to Graham's Addition, pretty close to the Penn Park, actually.
On the map here, this part here is the biggest issue, and that's
That's
with
where the dog
the
park.
opposition. This is the dog park portion of it. So this, if this were to continue to be in use, that would require the closing of the dog park. Whereas this
Why
part
do we
here,
need to close? If we use this area, why do we have to close the road?
because you can't have a run where the gates are open and expect dog park users to be able to let their dogs in off leash, because the dogs are gonna, there's a very good chance that dogs will run right out the gates that are open. So, this here is, this is Expo Parkway, which is part of Quann Park that he would still want to be able to use, the bike path that runs through here. This here, Goodman Park is adjacent to, it runs along Winter Creek also, so it's really just across the creek from Quann Dog Park. So it could add some length to the route without requiring use of that. But this isn't an option that we had measured out previously, so we'd have to verify that.
So can we extract a motion here? Move to approve this request, except that the dog park cannot be used and Goodman
Cannot be
Park cannot be closed, and the Goodman Park is included in the permit?
Yes, I can say
Does
that.
that,
Yeah.
does that satisfy what?
Yep.
I think that's a good compromise.
Well, so can I make a motion? I don't know that.
I think there was a motion. Now we have to vote on, that's an amendment to.
Somebody moved it, you moved
I'm
it.
not supposed to make motions.
You can entertain a motion, he moved it.
I'll
Somebody
second.
second?
I'll second.
Okay,
One of us.
all right. Do we now know what we're doing here?
So now we have amended motion, I think we vote on that and then vote on the main motion.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you for your,
Now we vote on.
Now you're back to the main motion.
all right.
That
So,
which is the amended motion.
Who had the main motion?
We never moved it.
You didn't?
That's what I
We
thought.
never did. We
Oh.
moved the approval of an altered motion.
Okay, so then we're, right.
That's okay with you.
We can make it work technically.
all right.
We're good. If necessary, I'll second Sam's motion.
Okay,
So you'll work with Lisa.
okay, fantastic.
So,
All right.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you for your patience.